Hello everyone and welcome to Ragnarok. In this video I'll be sharing over 30 must-know tips that will help you master the map. We'll discuss unique creatures and bosses, the best ways to farm loot, some of the best spawn locations, and a whole lot more. So let's get going. Now first up, the map boasts high-level creatures similar to that of the center, which means the early game may be a bit tougher than other story maps simply due to having to deal with high-level creatures early on a lot more often. This does however mean that once you start taming you will spend far less time having to grind to find that high-level creature you desire. Now next up is a great spawn location, and that's going to be Viking Bay. Here you'll find plenty of flat space for building and loads of creature spawns. Typically you'll find things like dodos, PTs, and other creatures that you would usually find on the beach. You will however find the random Carno or Rex who will be roaming down from the mountains, so do proceed with caution. This area is an excellent location due to proximity to everything else on the map. You have that nearby mountain that I just mentioned for all the great rare resources like metal, crystal, and obsidian. Then you have the bay itself, which has these freaky little sea scorpions inside, which give you many different resources, and cementing paste is also just a short distance away. I mentioned those freaky little sea scorpions, the Eurypterids. I probably still pronounced that wrong even with all your great feedback on my short, but yeah, these freaky little guys, they're amazing for the early game. They will knock you out in typically 1 or 2 hits because their attacks actually primarily deal torpor damage. However, you can use an ichthy to fight them. The dolphins are going to be your absolute best friend as they don't take torpor damage, and you can craft their saddle as early as level 13, and level 13 is a pretty manageable level to hit even with no explorer notes. So craft that saddle, hop on the dolphin, and go take out these scorpions. These scorpions are going to drop you black pearls, will drop silica pearls, chitin, and oil. Now next up is another great spawn location, and that's the highlands. This area is my personal favorite area to start since it's so unique in comparison to what's offered on other maps. Now what makes this a great spawn location is that you have immediate access to rare materials like metal and crystal. Then when it comes to the creatures you'll find here, you'll find plenty of Ovis and Equus. This area can be dangerous though. You will find creatures like aloes and gigas here, but the giga spawns are fairly rare. Also, the area is light on trees, so that's both a pro and a con. For building purposes, it can be a deterrent in the early game, but it also means you will see almost all threats far before they see you. Then in this highlands area, you also find wild crops, both rock carrots and savor roots. The savor roots make an excellent early game food source as they provide the same amount of food as a piece of cooked meat does, which is 20 food, but they also restore 10 water. The rock carrots, on the other hand, are the perfect food used to tame yourself an early Equus. Now, speaking of the Equus, this mount is often overlooked because taming it on berries is most definitely not the definition of fun, but having carrots early on really helps improve that taming process. The Equus is extremely versatile in the fact that its saddle is optional, so you can ride it the moment you tame it. Then while riding on its back, it's quite quick, it can jump, and even has a kick that can knock other creatures out, helping you grow your team without the need to farm up a bunch of narcotics. But if you do want to farm up narcotics, then simply craft and throw on its saddle, and you've now got yourself a mobile mortar and pestle. Additionally, when it comes to resource gathering, they can gather thatch, wood, and berries, but they also excel at far more than just traversal and taming. They can be quite helpful for base building, and this is due to the fact that they've got great weight reduction on many different important items. You see, if you're eyeing up a life in the desert, Equus is your absolute best friend. They've got an 80% weight reduction on cactus sap, sand, cementing paste, and clay, then a 50% weight reduction on stone, chitin, and keratin. Also, you can craft lassos in its inventory, allowing you to grab other players or creatures simply to keep them immobilized, or to even pull creatures that get knocked out in the water, which would typically drown and have their taming effectiveness ruined because, well, they die. And now you can save them. Truly a remarkable early tame. Alright, now speaking of resources, let's take a look at a few others. When starting out, another great resource known that you can harvest is the rotting bacillor corpses all up and down the beaches. They'll grant spoiled meat, hide, and a bit of oil. And those resources make it quite easy to craft up your first bolos and your narcotics. Then another resource specific node that can help you in the early game is the small storage boxes or crates that are easily broken into. You'll find these in Viking Bay and a few other locations across the map. These crates can drop arrows and metal tools like picks and more. So if you're looking to optimize your early game farming and get the highest yields from metal and crystal nodes when you're first starting out, ensure you make breaking open a few of these crates an early priority. Now moving on to another resource node, and that's going to be the giant beaver dams. They are significantly easier to spot and often yield much higher quantities of cementing paste. You'll find most of these located in the Beaver Sanctuary, which can easily be identified by the abundance of beavers roaming the area or in the water itself. You can also find a few of these giant beaver dams in the surrounding areas. Now moving on from resources, let's discuss loot. That's that sweet, powerful gear that we all grind so hard to get. There are so many ways to acquire loot on Ragnarok, but on the very first one, we're going to be talking about the desert loot crates. There are, I believe, 4 or 5 locations in total, and the gear that can be acquired from these can be incredibly powerful. You can find things like ascendant pumps and many other great ascendant items. Now, if you are new to the map or simply have a hard time remembering directions or locations, which if you ask my wife, that's definitely me. So if you're like me, then go through and place down a small pillared structure or even a couple of gates near the actual drop, so when you go to scout again, you'll easily be able to identify where these crates are located. And don't worry, these drops are actually patched in ASC so people cannot build directly over them, restricting your access to them. There's actually a certain radius around them where you simply just cannot build. Alright, now next up for loot is going to be the first mini boss, the Worm Queen. Even if you're not ready to challenge the queen herself, there are quite a few loot drops that you can just farm to get some better gear. Then when you become ready for the full cave, as you progress through the tunnels, you'll encounter worms, which are a great source of horns. And if you keep progressing, you will find the Ice Worm Queen herself, and if you manage to defeat her, she will spawn in even more red loot crates, giving you a wealth of loot for your time. Then the second mini boss is the Lava Golem, and it is significantly more challenging to navigate that cave than simply just to deal with that boss, as it keeps all of the natural resistances that golems tend to have, meaning dealing damage to this thing is not going to be an easy feat. But if you do manage to defeat it, then it can drop some of the very best blueprints in the game. Now if you're wondering when it comes to loot, what's going to be the best way to make the best use of your time, go through and farm the Ice Worm Cave during the day, and then farm the desert drops at night. I mention it in this order as the drops in the desert are far easier to see at night, so even if you don't have markers, they should be fairly easy to find. Alright, now let's discuss this map's specific creatures. First up is going to be the famous Griffin, who pretty much I think everybody's excited for. It is the only flyer in the game that allows you to wield a weapon while mounted, making it easily one of the very best creatures for taming and aerial combat. And if you find yourself low on stamina mid-flight, all you need to do is switch to the passenger seat mid-air, and the Griffin will start recovering stamina, allowing you to continue your journey without ever needing to land. And now, going into ASA, Griffins will be breedable, so now they can be both very tanky and extremely quick due to their aerial dive. And speaking of their dive, it makes them very useful for snatching up wyvern eggs. By chaining dives together, you can easily outmaneuver wyverns and have far more stamina and health than PTs do, making them one of the very best mounts for stealing your first eggs, or just stealing eggs in general. Now, speaking of wyverns, next up is the Ice Wyvern, who looks really cool, but that's about it, as they're typically considered the weakest wyvern in the game. Thankfully though, it was already mentioned a few times that in ASA, they are looking at giving the Ice Wyvern some possible changes to help it truly feel unique. And speaking of being unique, these eggs are not found in the standard wyvern trench, you will only find them in the snow biome. There's another unique creature, and that's going to be the Spirit Dire Bear, who's accompanied by the Spirit Dire Wolf. These two small mini bosses can be found at the end of the Labyrinth, one of the many hidden caves spread across the map. The entrance to this hidden cavern is going to be located in the desert, near the bottom of the mountainside. This labyrinth can be a bit of a challenge if you are not prepared. You see, it's full of random falls, puzzles, and dangerous creatures, and at one point you'll even need to make a sacrifice. It can be an absolute gauntlet to survive, but if you do manage to and make it to the final room, you will be greeted by these spirit bosses that I mentioned previously, and upon them being defeated, they will spawn in 2 different artifacts. Now, this labyrinth can spawn in a total of 4 artifacts, so you will need to return for future visits to ensure you can acquire every artifact it has to offer. Now, returning to the snow biome, you'll encounter the Murder Snow Biome, or the Murder Snow Biome, which is a biome that truly lives up to its name and is capable of killing you in a mere few seconds if you don't have adequate protection. Fur armor is obviously going to be your best friend here, but the primitive stuff is not going to cut it. You're going to want the highest tiers of armor to even stand a chance of being able to survive this nightmarish area. And FYI, this is typically where all the eggs for the Ice Wyverns are going to be located. I can't say that for sure in ASA, as we're also supposed to be seeing changes to those nests, but yeah, it's a dangerous area. Now, to help yourself out though, in either capacity, ASA or ASC, make sure you bring yourself an otter. They're going to give you far more protection than what most armor can even provide. Find yourself the highest level otter possible by leveling up its melee stat, which will further increase the total insulation it provides. Alright, now next up is going to be the Wyvern Nest. There are 3 locations on this map to collect Wyvern eggs. First up is going to be the main trench, which is reminiscent of the trench that you could find in Scorched Earth, but it should have much better levels, as Rag is known for its good levels in comparison to story maps like Scorched Earth, and that doesn't just apply to the creatures, it applies to the eggs as well. Then next up is going to be in the snow biome, as mentioned previously. That's where you'll find the Ice Wyvern eggs. And lastly is going to be a cave system which houses Wyvern eggs inside. This one can be a bit challenging to enter and escape, as it's got a narrow entrance and even part of it is submerged underwater. And if you're looking to steal the eggs with as little trouble as possible, then use a griffin and have that griffin carry an oviraptor. Before you set out, make sure you set the oviraptor to follow you as close as possible. Then once you get into the nest with the egg, drop the oviraptor, hop off your griffin, and whistle for the oviraptor to follow you. Have them walk directly over the egg and they will pick it up. And because the oviraptor picked it up, this will prevent the wyverns from aggroing onto you. Then simply just pick up your oviraptor with your griffin and head on out as safely as can be. Now on Ragnarok, there's also going to be unique weather events that take place. You're going to have windstorms like you do on Scorched Earth, the freezing cold weather in the snow as mentioned previously, and volcanic eruptions that will rain destruction down in the area surrounding the volcano, so ensure that you pay constant attention to the environment around you. Now lastly is going to be the bosses of the map, which is a dual boss fight with the dragon and the manticore. Being a duo boss, they are both easier than their usual solo counterparts. This fight though can be a bit of a challenge for sure, as can acquiring all the tributes. You will need a load of tributes for the alpha fights. One in particular though is often hard to acquire, and that's going to be Megalania Toxin. Thankfully on Ragnarok there's a location where a bunch of Megalania spawn outside of caves. You can simply kill them if you want, but that's not the best way. You can either knock them out, pull Toxin out of their inventory, let them wake up, and knock them out again, and they will then again have Toxin. Or alternatively, you could tame yourself a breeding pair. Once you've tamed a breeding pair, you will notice when you bring them back to their base, every single baby Megalania is going to have Megalania Toxin in its inventory. Alright, well I hope you found all these tips helpful and you feel more prepared for Ragnarok. Typically, I have been releasing ultimate guides prior to maps releasing. However, I just simply could not play Ragnarok on an ASA for more than 5 minutes without it crashing on me, so it just wasn't happening. But you best believe the moment it comes out in ASA, there is an ultimate guide coming, and I promise you it's the very best one yet. So if you want to see that, or any other ARC content, make sure you check out these two playlists here, subscribe for future content, and if you just want to simply talk ARC, then join the channel's Discord. Alright, I'll see you all later.